If you're one of my patrons, you already know that, well, you probably already know, you should know that I do a monthly live stream where I answer any questions about anything. And this month, Thomas asked me, what beliefs did I hold a year ago that I'm not so sure about anymore? And it just so happens that I had just spent the past month or so wrestling with a particular belief that I thought maybe required a little bit more examination. In fact, it wasn't just one belief, but a set of interconnected philosophies that I knew had some limits, but I didn't quite realize were potentially dangerous to all of humanity. And no, I'm not just being extra here. The implications of my philosophy could really be quite bad. That's the fun of philosophy, isn't it? But here are the beliefs in question: effective altruism, utilitarianism, and long-termism. To be fair, I didn't hold any of these ideas fanatically. All of them just seemed like pretty good ideas to me, more or less, with some obvious drawbacks here and there. So let's go through them. Effective altruism is the idea that we should critically evaluate our charity and find the best way to do the most good with our resources. For instance, last year I talked about the research that suggests the best way to help people up and out of poverty is to simply give them money. So that sounds reasonable, right? Use the scientific method to find out the best way to do the most good. Speaking of the most good, utilitarianism is the philosophy of maximizing happiness. I don't ardently commit myself to any one philosophy, but in general, I think that actions are moral if they increase happiness and well-being in myself and others. Long-termism is actually a term I only learned about in the past month or so, but aspects of it have been part of my own personal outlook for a really long time now. Generally, it's the idea that we should prioritize humanity's future. Different people have different understandings of what that means, but to me, I always kind of looked forward to a future where, for instance, humans would populate other planets so we don't go extinct because of one stupid meteor or something. And also I imagined a future where we can, for instance, upload human consciousness into the cloud, because I don't want to die. There, I said it. So all of these things sound pretty reasonable to me. But recently I realized that, unlike me, there are people who take all three of these ideas very, very seriously, and it has some pretty terrible implications. I can thank one guy for this realization: Sam Bankman-Fried, the now former billionaire CEO of crypto pyramid scheme FTX, which finally collapsed last month. Turns out Bankman-Fried is also into effective altruism, utilitarianism, and long-termism, and that all resulted in him scamming billions of dollars from people. And honestly, that is like the least awful result of this philosophy. So let's go through those previously considered reasonable beliefs, but from the perspective of someone who really gets into it. So effective altruism is not just about trying to do the most good with our resources, but committing 100% of our available resources only to the absolute best way to increase total happiness. Because we're also utilitarian, right? So the most effective kind of altruism will be the thing that increases total happiness and well-being the most. And what is that? Well, we find that answer in long-termism. If a future utopia involves humanity populating the universe with gazillions of people and uploading their consciousnesses to the cloud so that they theoretically never die, then that population of future humans contains a nearly infinite amount of happiness that will tip the scales in their favor regardless of whatever happiness you put on the other side of the scale. So the most effective altruism is whatever ensures that future generations' existence, space travel, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, body augmentation, these sorts of things. It's worth noting that some proponents of effective altruism, like Peter Singer, argue that it is essentially impartial in terms of who gets charity. Singer wrote in 1971 that it makes no moral difference whether the person I can help is a neighbor's child 10 yards away or a Bengali whose name I shall never know 10,000 miles away. The moral point of view requires us to look beyond the interests of our own society. But when you combine effective altruism with utilitarianism and long-termism, that doesn't actually make any sense. The most effective altruism will go to the person who is most likely to bring about that future utopia, meaning that the life of, say, a billionaire white guy who's actively trying to put humans on Mars is worth more than the life of a poor elderly woman in a Mumbai slum. All of this leads to the idea that the ends really do justify the means. In the real world example of Sam Bankman-Fried, who cares if a few million people lost a few $billion in the FTX crash if that money was then funneled into something like pandemic preparedness? Like, yes, some of the money, a lot of the money was also funneled into political donations, but that was just to ensure that the scam could continue as long as possible so that more money could go to things like preventing future pandemics from driving the human race to extinction before we have a chance to get into space. So it's worth it. You can maybe see now how, a few million people getting scammed out of a few $1 billion is really not the worst possible thing that this philosophy could justify. It could literally justify genocide. What's the entire population of Africa compared to the future happiness of 10 to the 45th power post-humans spread across the galaxy? And yes, that's a real number cited by long-termist evangelist William McCaskill, who was Sam Bankman-Fried's mentor, and Hillary Greaves in a paper published just last June. That's 10 with 45 zeros out of it, that number of people who might live forever. Their happiness is going to win every time. And my reference to genocide here isn't all that far-fetched. If there's been a little itch in the back of your brain wondering whether long-termists have dabbled in eugenics, the answer is a resounding yes. People like Elon Musk have come to realize that they probably won't be alive for the big cancer cures, the body modifications, the consciousness uploads that will allow them to live indefinitely. So they're falling back onto the next best thing, having loads and loads and loads of children, because a lot of them not only believe that this will carry their genetics forward, but they believe that their own wealth and success and apparent intelligence are coded into those genetics. And so it's to the human race's benefit that they pump out as many babies as possible. Jeffrey Epstein, for instance, had plans to impregnate 20 women at once, and then have his head and dick cryogenically frozen. Musk has been tweeting constantly about population collapse and currently has 10 children that we know of. When a reporter asked two pronatalists whether or not they were dabbling in eugenics by genetically testing and choosing embryos they felt were most likely to be intelligent, they laughed and said that they were adding hipster eugenicists to their business cards. Also, who uses business cards? It's 2022. But anyway, learning all of this, it hasn't drastically changed my beliefs. I still believe in critically evaluating the effectiveness of our charity. I still believe that to a moderate degree, in real world situations, we should strive to increase happiness in the world when we can. And I would still love to see humanity spread out across the stars. But it's that last one that I've reconsidered the most. Maybe my selfish hope to live forever isn't exactly healthy for me or humanity. Maybe future humanity doesn't need my very special genetics or even my very special consciousness to be the best that humanity can be. And maybe figuring out how to keep people alive forever is just going to lead to future gazillionaires taking advantage of that while letting everyone else die. And maybe I wouldn't even want to live forever in a world of Elon Musks and Sam Bankman-Frieds and other proud hipster eugenicists. It's a lot to think about, but in the meanwhile, I'm just going to, keep caring about the current population of Earth and also the next few generations who will be dealing with a severely damaged planet. Let's call it midtermism. Moderation in all things, you guys, especially in philosophy and religion.